Nikki, welcome. Good to have you.
Hey Brian, I'm super excited to be here. How are you?
I am, you know what I love is like the random serendipitous of like how you came on this podcast. I can't remember like
Was
who.
it me like trolling you in the comments, like, okay, fine, you can stop begging me to be on your podcast sort of thing? That's like sort of my shtick.
I think I made some comment and some post about like, oh, it's good to have like, podcast guests together. Like anytime I see like multiple guests on, like one thing, and then I
Yeah,
think you
yeah,
jumped in. So I'm like, cool. Like I like your background and
yeah,
you've done a lot of things. And you were the deal doctor, right? Is this
yeah.
where did that come from?
That was actually Dom's idea. So Dom is another creator on LinkedIn and he we've become friends. Like one of the coolest parts about creating on LinkedIn is these little like cohorts of friends that you make. And so he like sent me a message. He's like, "Nikki, I just got this crazy idea. Like what if you diagnose deals and like cuz he had a deal that he wanted me to diagnose. The first one I ever did was his deal. No one actually knows that, but um, if you're listening, you're getting the inside scoop. But yeah, so I was like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And so I did it and everyone loved it. And I just got sent my second deal today in my DMs, and I'm about to record a video on why I think that deal was lost. So it's just, I don't know, just like a fun series.
Yeah. Well, I'll actually love it because it's something, and we can get into kind of the sales conversation because so many folks, whether they're new sellers, they're founders, it doesn't matter. Like one of the questions I get a lot is, Brian, I have zero idea of like how this thing, like, why did it not close? Why did they not
Yeah.
go through with it? And they don't realize it's probably 20 things,
Yeah.
potentially there's a breadcrumbs, but I'm
Yeah.
kind of curious, I guess, let's start from the beginning there. Like, how do you think about maybe sales today than you used to think about it?
Mhm.
Maybe when you were an SDR back, what, 10 years ago or so?
Yeah, yeah, man, I was an SDR when I was 25 and I'm 39, so it's been like 14 years
Yeah,
of this. But a lot has changed. I think, it's interesting. That's such an interesting question because I think in the beginning of my career, I relied very heavily on my ability to create relationships or build relationships very quickly with people and connect with people very quickly. That's just sort of an innate skill that I have had, is that I can very quickly get along with someone and strike up a conversation, right? Like the quintessential salesperson. And then as I continued throughout my career, actually when I was working at HackerOne was the first time that I really had like formal medic sales process training. And I was like, holy shit, like if you layer on top sales process to like that soft skill of relationship building, you create this like formula that you can really start to predict success with. And that excited me incredibly. And so I kind of became like the sales process nerd and like went really hard and deep into the process side of things. And then with like the onset of AI and automating so much of that sales process, I have now come back around to relying much heavier on the relationship side of things because that's the part of sales that you can't outsource to AI,
right.
right? That you can't replicate. That feels the most like authentic and fresh and genuine these days. So it's been like an interesting journey how it all kind of came about, but yeah.
I agree. My path was fairly similar of like you kind of it just the whole drinking through a fire hose type thing. It's all this information and then how do you piece it together? And I'm the same way. I've always been like a relationship. I used to be a
Mhm.
golf professional. That was my first career. Like I love just working with people, talking with people and solving um and it's really coming around very recently of like I'm tripling down on that because I'm like
Yeah.
that's where the leverage is for me. It's like, that's where I help the best. Like, why not
Yeah.
that I got away from it, but you feel like you almost get there's so many tools and it's like, oh, you can do all these different things. It's not as relevant, I don't think.
Yeah, and, something that they're really relying heavily on at Deal right now, which is who I sell for currently, is getting in front of your buyer. Like, get on a plane, go to the office, and get in front of your buyer in person because that like, you can't scale that, right? Like, you can't automate that, and those are the things that we're finding to be the most impactful nowadays because everything else that you could scale is no longer effective. So it's really interesting how it's all come full circle.
Do you remember? I'm gonna ask you if you don't know that you don't know because I remember this very vividly, but do you remember when you actually started to lean into who you were as a person to become a better seller versus kinda
Yeah.
through the, "This is how you should be" type?
That's such a that's such a good question. I don't think that I've ever to toot my own horn, I don't think I've ever really gotten away from that. I am, like, impulsively honest and overshare to a fault. So I don't think that like, I'm not very good at putting on, like, the corporate face where I'm like, "Okay, we're all gonna be professional and buttoned up now." Like, my personality, I think, comes through in my interactions because I don't really know any other way to be.
Mhm.
So I think that that's always honestly helped me throughout my sales career because I think that that is the reason why people kind of, I'm able to build these relationships pretty quickly. It was more so just like layering on top the sales process on top of that. But I don't like I like to think that I never really lost that because I saw it work from the beginning. So I always have leaned into that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really good because I know a lot of folks, like I said, for me personally, it's like you put the I gotta put the sales hat on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sell, and it's like, "Hold on, Brian, there's this whole other person here that has, this personality and, like, be yourself,"
Yeah.
and it took, like I said, not a long time, but definitely you need, like, to get kicked in the pants, and
Mhm.
that's what I see a lot of folks, I know you talk a lot about mindset, but that's, like, one of those things to be confident in who you are, to show up,
Absolutely.
that comes across, right, in a sales call.
I mean, like, if I could times that by 100, I would. Like, absolutely. I think that it's so easy for sellers to get in their own heads, and then that's when they get tripped up and they get nervous and they stumble over their words because they're thinking too much about how they're showing up and how they're sounding and how they're being perceived, and they just stop being who they are. And your buyer can feel that from a mile away. And however uncomfortable you are in that moment, your buyer is more uncomfortable. So, whenever I talk to my coaching clients about being in your own head, there's a very easy antidote to that. You immediately start thinking about the person you're talking to and not yourself. You start thinking, who is this person? Who is Brian? How was his morning? What did he and his son talk about this morning before he took him to school? Like, what is his experience like? How many other vendors has he spoken to? Is he stressed out right now? If you start focusing on your buyer, who you're talking to, and getting curious about who they are, how they are, then you can't be in both heads at once. So you automatically get out of your own way and you start to re-engage with the person that's sitting right in front of you.
Yeah. I mean, it's pure empathy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what a lot of folks forget, and I don't know that I'm just gonna say it raw and real. It's like they think that the only time they engage that way empathetically is through like this, like conversation. And where I
Yeah.
find a lot of folks struggle is like when they follow up an email or,
Mhm.
hey, no, they haven't got back to me, and they fire off this like, like, oh, whatever, on a scale of this or A, B, and
Mhm.
C, are you still interested in this deal? Or you're like these stupid, and I'm like, maybe their kid was sick for a week. Like
Yeah.
something like have some empathy and step back a little bit. And folks just I see they miss the boat on that. They sometimes they get good up front, but it's
Mm.
really on the other stuff where they miss.
That's such a good call out. That's such a good call out. Now I'm like thinking about myself and I'm like, I'm wondering if I'm only good at it in the conversations. That's such a good call out, Brian. I've never thought about that. I'm gonna
Oh,
think about that a lot. Um, but you're absolutely right. And yeah, I mean, I think it has to span across the entirety of the relationship, right? And, one of the reasons why like I show up on LinkedIn the way that I do and I I speak very emphatically. I leave any typos that I may have been have been included in my post. I use like very exaggerative language, and it's because I want to write how I sound genuinely when I speak. And I really try to do that in my sales emails as well. Like if I'm sounding too, again, corporate or buttoned up, I will purposefully almost sound too human so that I don't come across I'd rather sound too human than too robotic. I'd rather err on the side of familiarity than, like, professionalism, to be honest. And it is like a fine line, like, you don't wanna be inappropriate, you don't wanna be too casual, but at the same time, like, you wanna keep that building that relationship throughout the entire sales process.
Well, and I think one of the things you do well with like the I gotta lean into the video more, but, is you create and I think this is it's a word that I try to coach folks on is tension.
Mm.
Create some sort of tension in the videos where it makes you have to think a little bit, right? You did one on that we can get to imposter syndrome if you wanna battle on that, but, because
Man, that one.
men do feel it just as much. But, no, I like it because I think tension is a big thing because everyone want if you want to be liked by everyone, you're gonna be liked by no one.
Oh, dude, I was just talking about this the other day to my friend. She was like, "I thought that I was super likable because it turns out like some people on her team, she's not as liked as she thought that she was." And I was like, "If you are liked by everyone, you are saying nothing.
Yeah,
Like that is a sign that I am not being honest. I'm trying to be liked." Like I try and stay absolutely honest to myself so that if people, are in the comments disgruntled by what I shared or debating me on what I shared, I know that I can sit in my own truth and feel good about what I said,
yeah.
right? Because it came from my true internal belief system. And yes, I can be questioned and I can be corrected and I can look inward and reassess. That's fine. But at least I know if I showed up honestly, I can stand by what I said and not feel defensive, if someone has a differing opinion.
Are you tell me if I'm wrong, I'm picking up on this. Are you extremely direct
Yes.
with your client? Okay, you and I are probably very similar.
Yeah.
'Cause people, like, watch sometimes they'll look at my call or they'll be observing, like, a call, and they're like, "Whoa, I can't believe you said that." Now, not negative stuff, but, like, I'll
Yeah.
tell people, like, "Listen, our implementation's not perfect. We have skeletons in the closet like anyone
Yeah.
else, but here's what it's like, don't try to say everything because if once I hear as a buyer, "Oh, yeah, we've
It's
everything's great.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, our company's amazing." It's like, "No,
Yeah.
you're not. No
Yeah.
one's amazing. We're
Yeah.
telling you what's wrong, and
Yeah.
I can that's fine."
But again, it's all about that building that trust, right? So if I'm honest with you, like even if it's not perfect, at least we're building real trust between us, hopefully, as a buyer and a seller.
Yeah,
And I have said this before and I stand by it. And it's very true in a lot of these past deals that I've worked in the past year where I care more about who I'm talking to than whether or not I can sell to them. And there's been multiple occasions or opportunities where the deal did not go through and I'm still in touch and in contact and communicate with those buyers
yeah,
and now have friendships with those buyers. I mean, LinkedIn makes that a lot easier because they like stay in touch and then we form a relationship, but like it is more important to me who you are as a human than what I can sell you. And I think that people can feel that. Like if you are coming into an interaction with just the end in mind, like people feel like, okay, like all I am is a closed one to them, and they become defensive. And I think the real art in selling is allowing people to lay down those defenses so they can really tell you what's going on behind the scenes, and not just like answering your discovery questions with a yes or no answer.
yeah. Well, and even to that point, like, the end in mind for most people is they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna bring them in as a client. Like, I'm gonna cl I cannot stand the, like, I'm gonna close them." And it's like, it's such a I know that's the general language we use sometimes in sales, but it's like, you're not closing anyone. They're gonna make the decision.
Yeah.
If you think you're gonna manipulate or persuade them, go ahead all day and think you're gonna do that. But the reality is they're making that decision. It's how do you show up for them, right? I mean, it's
100%. And Brian, this leads to such an important topic is that as sellers, we like to think that we have total control over our outcomes, right? Like if we are great, we will close. Like this leads to a lot of problematic thinking because when something doesn't go right, we 100% blame ourselves. It's like when something goes right, don't take all the credit. And when something goes wrong, don't take all the credit, right? So if you continue to show up and do the work and have genuine conversations and genuinely care about who you're talking to, it will all work out and you will be a much happier seller along the way. But if you are trying to force outcomes and you think that your brute force is directly, to thank or blame for that outcome, it's a very risky game that you play because it will impact how you think about yourself and you'll start to, get very down on yourself when things don't go your way and you'll get very high and mighty when things do. And like a humbling moment is usually right around the corner when
Yeah.
we experience that.
Yeah. Yeah, you bring up a really good point because I think we struggle, and I use we because I'm probably the same way at times of like, we struggle with this idea of like, well, this goes back to even organizations like, oh, I that's why even the I won the deal.
Mhm.
Oh, did you? I mean, unless you're the only person in business, but even that, but like even businesses we're in, right? No, you have solutions, consultants or solution architects. You have maybe product did something, maybe marketing had a plan. Like there's all the, an SDR might have called and got that warm opportunity. And I even go back to like, and this is why SDRs are such an important role. They get lost in it. Is that if they have a really good interaction early on, maybe as you
Yeah.
when you're an SDR, um, that transcends that
Impact.
relationship
Yeah.
and impacts it later on, right? And you don't know that necessarily as the AE, but it could actually really had helped, right? Because
Yeah.
I've had people that I've brought business in, and they've been like, "You guys were so awesome through the entire process from so and so, whatever." And people,
Mhm.
yeah, it's like, "No, no, I won this deal." Yeah, but there were 10 other people that were also touching this.
And I really think that that realization comes with maturity. Like, I do. I think, like, just being in the game long enough, being around, long enough, I think when we are new to sales and we have a great year, like, when I was, number 1 seller on my team and president's club and whatever, I took all the credit, all the credit. And guess what happened the next year? Like, it was a huge failure. I missed my number terribly, and I ended up getting laid off.
Yeah.
Like, 1 year to the next. And that juxtaposition just it matured me as a seller so incredibly to now, like, I'm so much more even keeled as a seller. I could probably sell for another 10 years if I wanted to because I'm not riding the ride with such a grip as
Yeah.
I was in the beginning. Like, I observe the highs and I observe the lows, and I know that I impact both, but, like, 1, it's not all me in either scenario, and 2, it's also not the end of the world or the end all be all of success, right? Like, I just think with time, like, we gain some perspective, and that's I talk to my coaching clients a lot about this. It's usually people that are just that roller coaster is giving them whiplash, and they are like, "Get me off this ride." And unless you figure out how to weather those ups and downs in sales, like, you won't last. You'll get burnt out. So
Do you only get that from like you mentioned, you kinda had to go through that pivotal year, like, to get to that maturity, or is there anything that you think folks could look at today to maybe again, try to impact something without getting laid off or having
yeah,
some.
yeah, and I talk about that a lot. I'm like, learn all these lessons now, like the easy way and not the hard way. But a lot of times we are stubborn. And a lot of times, like, the universe has a really funny way of giving you gentle opportunities to learn a lesson. And if you choose not to, like a little bit more direct ways to learn that lesson. So I think if we like have the self-awareness and drive to actually look and question those things, it's not necessary to go through the layoff experience to learn it, but you do have to kind of question things and be willing to look and learn and be honest with yourself. And it's really one of the best things about me posting on LinkedIn is the number of sellers that, like, came out of the woodworks and was like, "I wanna work on this," or "I'm struggling with this," or "Can you help me with this?" Like, I think that the only reason why my content resonated and did so well right out the gate is because sellers were desperate to get off that ride, like, they were struggling. And so I think that a lot of people that I speak to are absolutely willing to kind of see it in a different way, whether they have experienced the layoff or not, which a lot of them have. So,
Yeah. Well, and it even goes back to where I know we're talking a lot about, like, the mindset shift of, like, sales is not tips and tactics and, "Ooh, say this script and they will do." Sure, anything's gonna work at some capacity, and that's why I'm such a big believer in, like, if you have skills like, we've talked about both those. If you have skills that you've learned and you have the systems, like you talk about the sales process and stuff, then it's really just letting yourself shine
yeah.
and you kind of get in the way. It just like you do well, and then you kind of tweak here and there, right?
Yeah.
Because you're always evolving.
And it can be fun. Like, it can be a lot of fun once you realize, okay, I have these skills. I enjoy talking to people. I know, like, the general sales process, structure. Have fun with it, and it's when we put this immense amount of pressure on ourselves that it takes all of the fun away and out of selling, because we just, like, feel anxiety and pressure and fear of failure. So, like, once I and listen, like, the only reason I can talk like this is because I'm talking to myself. I have to remind myself of this all the time. Like, I was struggling in various phases of my career. And, I've had to take a step back and really focus on my mindset and get really clear with myself. Um, and only through those practices was I able to fall back in love with sales and say, "Oh no, I can keep doing this." Because there are various points in my career where I was like, I can't sustain this any longer.
How much do you feel you have to love the product to be able to sell it?
That is a good question. So, I do think that you have to believe in the product. Love the product. Like, I sell payroll and HR, software right now. Like, is that a deep passion of mine? No. But do I think that it's the best product on the market? Absolutely. So, like, I'll be able to get behind it for sure. I do think you need to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit. Like, you kind of have to jump in with 2 feet and fully embrace it in order to be as effective as you want to be. Now, sometimes when we get in and we're like a year in, we have some realizations about the product that maybe aren't so positive, and we're like, okay, this is not working the way that I was told it was supposed to work. And usually at that point, like for a seller like me who prides herself on being very honest and genuine, it can affect how effective I am in my sales process. And so that's usually when, like, I might have to question if that's the right place for me to be or not.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, you bring up a good point because it's like if my thing is like if they're working on the product, if there's a vision, if there's
Yeah.
kind of when we see an opportunity, then you feel like you're a part of it. And I think this
Yeah.
could change. Like I don't know if you've been at any small, like I was an employee 24 at a startup.
Yeah.
Um, so I was really involved in like product and like you relaying. Now it's like not as involved because again, there's more layers. And I think that's something to look out for, depending on what size of organization. Do you actually impact those
Yeah.
product decisions, or not?
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's all the experience that you want to have. The company that I was with before Deal was very small. I was employee number 40 something. And the product was still coming to fruition, and especially like our go-to-market strategy and most motion and messaging and who our ICP was and how we were selling it and how we were positioning it. I liked being involved in that go-to-market strategy piece of it. That is very interesting and exciting to me. But there was so much iterations happening constantly. It's very hard to kind of run when there's so many changes happening all the time that you have to continue to pivot and keep up with. Now that I'm at Deal, which is a very solidified product, but always changing because they've gone through like 10 acquisitions over the past few years. So we just keep expanding our offering, but it's very much like I can just focus on the selling part of it rather than, the direction and the changes and keeping up with product. So I think it just depends on the experience that you want to have as a seller. There's pros to both.
I wanna go back, we were talking. I threw out the imposter syndrome thing, but it relates to, whether you're new to sales or not, but the folks that are kinda stuck, like, let's say they're an AE and they haven't been promoted, or an SDR haven't been promoted, and they
Mhm.
kinda hang on. Partly that, and tell me if you feel the same way, like, partly that's a confidence thing of asking and or being willing to leave and go interview for other places. Some people like, "Oh, they said they're gonna give me a promotion in 6 or 8 months. I'll stick around." Like, how often do you see that? Maybe you experience it yourself.
I don't experience it myself. I am a consummate job hopper. You can take a look at my record. I get bored very easily and I move on. So no, I have the opposite problem. I don't stick around. But I talk to a lot of people that do. And this is my philosophy on it. I would rather personally make a move and it be the wrong move than risk staying stuck somewhere for too long. Like, I am so scared of not experiencing everything and pushing myself to grow and expand and take on new challenges that it manifests in the opposite end of the spectrum for me, where I probably should have stuck around longer in a couple of, opportunities that I was in. But I do talk to a lot of people that it's really interesting to me. Like, they will be unhappy in their position. They will feel stuck. They will feel unappreciated, and they will get a job offer to go somewhere else and they will turn it down. And I see it all the time. And they'll make some sort of excuse like, "Oh, it's just not the right time for me to take on something new," or, "Oh, I don't know, like, there was this hiccup that I didn't feel good about," and so they'll stay. And to me, that's just being scared.
Yeah,
Like, it really, really to me, it comes down to being scared. And personally, my philosophy is fear is never a good enough reason not to do something. If the only reason why I'm not doing something is that I am scared, that is not a good enough reason to not do it. So I think being really honest with yourself about why you're not taking that opportunity, or why you're not speaking up, or why you're not looking to grow,
yeah,
or taking that leap to grow, like, that's where all of the mindset stuff comes into play. It's like, what's actually going on here? What am I actually feeling? What am I actually afraid of? And it's usually failure. I can't do it. I'm not gonna live up to the expectations, or it's gonna be uncomfortable. It's gonna be new, unknown. And
yeah,
I was gonna make a whole post the other day. I don't know if I ever did, but your willingness to feel discomfort is directly correlated to your ability to grow and expand.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, because it's the simple analogy, like the factory worker, like, you're just used to pushing this one button, and now you're like, "Ugh, I don't know if I can do the other thing." Again, it goes back to the imposter syndrome a little bit. It's like, of course you can't do the other thing. You haven't done it
Yeah,
before.
right.
Okay. Go do it and try, and at worst again,
Yeah.
that's one thing. I mean, oh god, I've beat myself up so much over the years about this. Is like, what is the worst that can happen? I have this thing written on my wall. It's in my mirror. I've had it for years, since 2019. It says, "Why can't it be you?" It's a
Yes.
because why can't I write the children's books? Why can't I do the podcast? Why can't I do this or that? It's like, I can do it. I just have
My
to do it.
my thing is if anyone can do it, it's me.
Yeah.
Like, if anyone can do it, if they can do it, if he can do it, if she can do it, like, if anyone can do it, it's me. And it is, it's about, and I talked about this in the comments because, man, that post that you keep referring to, it went viral, it blew up, and I had no idea it was gonna create such, polarity in the responses. But all press is good press, right? So it's fine.
I
But
mean, that's a good point, though. I mean, it's a fair point. It's a conversation.
but something that was said is, like, it's not a matter of not feeling the discomfort, it's knowing that, okay, there is a gap in my skills, but I know that I have the ability to close that gap with time and effort because I believe in my own capability. Like, to me, that is the difference between, and I know that imposter syndrome, like, it ties very closely to, like, feeling like a fraud, or like you somehow tricked people or duped people into the position that you're in. The other definition that I read that was very interesting to me is, like, feeling like it's luck. Like, you keep getting lucky and you end up in the position that you're in. And I just spoke to a woman the other day who was winning an award, a sales award, and she was like, "I just got lucky this year." And I know this woman's career. I'm like, "What, you've just gotten lucky every year and you have this incredible sales career because you're just lucky?" It's so interesting to me how quickly we will devalue ourselves because we're uncomfortable with taking that credit. And now we did talk about taking all the credit. There is a spectrum, I think, but, like, not being afraid to step into your full power, like, that is something that I believe in a lot.
Hmm. And not only are we bad at that at times, we're great at giving it to others.
Yeah,
Great at giving it to, "Oh my god, they deserve that. That was whatever." But when it comes
yeah.
to us, we're like, for some reason, I don't
It's
know.
it's so interesting because it's almost like it manifests in 2 very different ways, like the egomaniac and the person that continuously, like, devalues himself or has imposter syndrome. To me, it manifests from the same place, but it appears outwardly in 2 very different ways. And I think that that's kind of what the people in the comments were getting at. It affects men and women equally, but a lot of times it will manifest in a man as, like, this huge ego, as a way to cover up their own insecurities. And for women, it potentially manifests in more of, like, self doubt. I'm not making any claims. I don't totally understand it. I'm not making any claims, but I think that they're kind of 2 sides of the same coin.
Yeah. Well, I think what we're getting at, though, is there's a recognition of, there's something I don't have the capability today to do. Like, maybe it's that
Yeah,
SDR going to AE or whatever it is, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. And
right.
really, the ones that make those big leaps and take that quote unquote risk are the ones that generally get what they want to get. It's like,
Lucky.
yeah, it's like you get lucky by asking.
By
By
putting yourself in the position. Yeah,
Right, exactly. Like, you don't know what's gonna happen, but again, it goes back to that question, like, what's the worst that happens?
yeah. And I do that sometimes. I will play out the worst case scenario.
Yeah,
Like, my husband and I just launched a local brick and mortar business. We both have full-time jobs selling, and we just launched a local business. It's a lot, and we have 2 kids. So we have a lot on our plates right now, and it's a lot of pressure. And just the other night, I kind of played out worst case scenario to him because he's feeling a lot of pressure right now. And I'm like, "Listen, like, even if the business goes under, we both get fired. That's worst case, right? Business goes under, we both get fired. That's pretty bad.
yeah,
We still have an entire career of experience behind us and we will get other jobs.
yeah,
Like, and we own a beautiful house. Like, like, we will be okay. We will always be okay." And so I think playing out those scenarios sometimes can help kind of pull you off the ledge when it all kind of feels a little bit overwhelming. And that's something that I talk to my coaching clients a lot about, is just trying to gain that perspective of, like, this is not the whole world. This is not the end all be all. Like, you will be okay.
yeah, I wish we were gonna have more time to talk brick and
Oh
mortar
man, are we already there?
and kids, yeah, I mean,
Jeez.
I know, time flies. Maybe what we should do is we should do a part 2 here,
Yeah.
and talk, like, parenting and talk. We'll get
Yes.
started parenting as sellers and what have you.
I would
Um,
love that.
hey, this is fun. Okay, so let's end on this though, because one of the things I love to ask, give advice if you want, but advice in the form of action is what I really love.
Yeah.
So, is there a challenge, whether they're a new seller or it's just someone general from a mindset, a challenge, maybe a question to ask, something
Yeah.
to take action today?
Yeah, I love this question, and I'm pretty sure your listeners are gonna hate my answer, and that is to get quiet with yourself. Once a day, check in with yourself. Meditate, write in your journal, talk to yourself, I don't care what it looks like, but if you are disconnected from yourself, it is impossible to genuinely connect with other humans. So, if you want to be more effective as a seller, you want to be able to connect with humans on a genuine level, we have to start with ourselves. So, get quiet with yourself, check in, get to know yourself, get to like yourself, and see how it changes your life.
That's that tension we talked about. Create that tension, so that's good. Okay, Nikki, so LinkedIn probably the best spot people say hello?
Yeah, absolutely. Slide into my DMs. I, like an idiot, connect I accept all connection requests. So, yeah, Nikki Lang on LinkedIn. I try to put out content daily, and I would love to start a conversation. So, slide into my DMs, let me know you listened to the episode, and let's chat.
Nikki, thank you so much. It's been a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Brian.